Emma's car turned onto the familiar narrow road, where rows of maple trees on either side were painted gold under the pale late autumn sunlight. Leaves drifted down in the breeze like a slow-motion film, pulling her back to days long past. 3 years. It had been 3 years since she left this town, carrying with her a shattered heart and an empty soul. And now Emma was back. Not because she was ready, but because she knew if she didn't return, she would remain forever trapped in that pain. She stopped the car in front of the old house nestled by the maple forest. The small white house with its red-tiled roof, filled with memories of her and Nathan. The wooden door creaked as Emma pushed it open. The scent of aged wood, the smell of her childhood days, rushed toward her, tightening her chest. The living room remained the same. Only time had changed. On the fireplace, a small wooden box sat silently. Emma stepped forward, her hands trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside were letters. Nathan's familiar handwriting, each letter and every stroke, still carried his breath. Emma, if you are reading this, it means I can no longer be by your side. But you must know that my love for you has never faded. I leave these words not for you to cry over, but to remind you that we once loved each other with all our hearts. Emma clutched the paper tightly, tears spilling before she even realized. Each letter was a fragment of their story. Their most beautiful moments, words left unsaid, and dreams left unfinished. At the bottom of the box was an old photograph, her and Nathan, sitting under a fiery red maple tree, laughing as if the whole world had vanished around them. Emma sank to the floor, the box cradled in her arms, and let herself cry freely for the first time in so many years. Outside the window, golden leaves continued to fall, gently, silently, as if whispering secrets only autumn could understand. Emma clutched the photograph tightly in her hands, the old memories rising up, so vivid that she could almost smell the damp earth and hear the rustling leaves around her. It had been a late autumn afternoon. Emma was only 7 years old and Nathan was 2 years older. The little girl with wispy blonde hair, wearing a pale blue wool dress, had gotten lost in the maple forest after chasing a squirrel. Sunlight streamed through the golden canopy, creating a magical scene, but for such a tiny child, it became a bewildering maze. Emma began to panic. She called for her mother, her father, but only the wind answered. And then, like a miracle, Nathan appeared. Hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, the brim of his cap casting a shadow over his warm brown eyes. Nathan looked at Emma, tilted his head slightly and smiled. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice strangely calm. Emma whimpered and nodded. Nathan stepped forward, reaching out his hand without another word. She took it, that hand so warm and steady, and instantly felt safer than any comforting word could have made her feel. Nathan didn't lead her straight home. Instead, he guided her along the leaf-covered paths, showing her bird nests high up in the branches, deer tracks imprinted in the soil, and a giant hollow maple tree that the town's children often used as a secret hideout. They sat down beneath the great tree, where the sunlight spilled like golden honey. Nathan pulled a caramel candy from his pocket and offered it to Emma. "You're going to be okay," he said. "Whenever you're scared, just remember, there are people who will always find you." Emma looked up at him, her round eyes filled with trust. In that moment, the world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them, wrapped in the tender arms of autumn. From that day on, Emma followed Nathan like a shadow. They grew up together. Their mischief, their arguments, their first shared laughter, and even the clumsy stirrings of young love as adolescence crept in. She squeezed the photograph even tighter, closed her eyes, and let the flood of memories wash over her heart. Outside, night had fallen. The wind blew stronger, sending the maple leaves scattering like they were fleeing the coming winter. And Emma knew, her true journey here was only just beginning. A week after her return, Emma decided to visit Mirror Lake, the place tied to the most beautiful years she had shared with Nathan. The path leading to the lake stretched beneath a canopy of fiery red maple trees, each step pulling her deeper into memory. As children, they would ride their bikes here every weekend, carrying cold sandwiches, an old blanket, and countless youthful dreams. That afternoon 7 years ago, everything was bathed in an oddly warm golden hue. They sat side by side at the water's edge, watching the gentle ripples reflect the colors of the sky. Nathan, at 17, was no longer the clumsy boy she once knew. A thin sweater clung to his strong shoulders, and his eyes held a depth that words could not capture as he looked at Emma. "Emma," Nathan called softly. She turned toward him, her cheeks flushed pink in the setting sun. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace. A small pendant shaped like a maple leaf, glistening under the fading light. "You'll always have me," Nathan said, his voice trembling slightly, as if each word weighed heavy on his heart. "No matter where we are, no matter what happens, I promise I'll find my way back to you." Emma's eyes widened, her heart pounding so fiercely she could hear it in her ears. "Then I promise too," she said with a tearful smile. "I'll always wait for you." Nathan fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers brushing lightly against the delicate skin at the nape of her neck. In that moment all the sounds of the world seemed to fade away. It was just them, their simple promises and autumn's gentle embrace bearing silent witness. Emma lifted her hand to her neck, unconsciously reaching for the empty space where the necklace had once rested. She had worn it for years afterward, until the day everything fell apart. By the lake, the wind picked up, rippling the surface of the water as if whispering ancient stories. Emma sat down on the grass, hugging her knees to her chest. "I waited, Nathan," she whispered, "and I'm still waiting." But now, the promises of that day were nothing more than echoes of what had been lost. That winter came earlier than usual. The tiny town was quickly buried under white snow, the streets deserted, with only the sound of the wind howling past rooftops heavy with frost. Emma and Nathan still met often, huddled by the fireplace in the small coffee shop on the corner, their hands entwined under the table like two accomplices sharing a sweet secret. But then, Emma began to notice something different. Nathan, the boy who used to sprint through the woods, who used to race her across Mirror Lake, now gasped for breath after just a few short steps. Once, while they were laughing together, he suddenly clutched his chest, trying to mask the momentary pain with a strained smile. "Probably just a cold." Nathan brushed it off, his eyes still shining but missing something familiar. Emma didn't press him, partly because she trusted him but mostly deep down because she was afraid of the answer. Then one early December day, when the lake was frozen over, Emma accidentally caught sight of Nathan at the town's only clinic. She stood frozen outside the fogged-up window. Inside, Nathan sat hunched in a chair, his once broad shoulders now strangely frail. Dr. Hammond, the oldest man in town, placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder, his face heavy with a sorrow he couldn't quite hide. Emma left before Nathan could see her. Her heart pounded wildly, each beat feeling like it might tear her chest apart. That evening, under a heavy snowstorm, Emma waited for Nathan outside his house. When Nathan finally stepped out, the warm yellow light spilling over his hair dusted with snow made him look heartbreakingly fragile. Emma rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him without a word. Nathan stood still in her embrace for a long time before he finally whispered, like the wind slipping past her ear, "I'm sorry." Emma didn't ask. She just cried, as deep inside she already knew. There would be no endless summers for them anymore. No more lofty promises. Only the fragile present, and a quiet fear that crept into every breath. That night, sitting together by the fire, Nathan took her hand in his, squeezing it tightly, as if he could somehow hold on to her, hold on to everything with the sheer force of his love. "You're not allowed to cry for me," Nathan whispered, his lips brushing lightly against her forehead. Emma nodded, even as tears soaked her sleeves. Outside, the snow kept falling, tiny silent flakes, vanishing the moment they touched the ground. Just like their dreams. En hungay sao du, Emma cam the Nathan the doi. On koi nu han du a gio nu the moachien van ben thuong. On dan ko di dao dui bao troi exam zit. Nem tuet veo tok ko. Ku en hung ka chuen ngio si en gek de ko koi. En hung dang sao tat sie Emma cam nan duok. Du chi la vio bio si. Mot dem no kai Nathan che voyare nguai de ne dien thoi Emma lan dao tien. Buk veo kan fong man luan ju qua. Kan fong no lan leo von gap tren and hung man gep roy ari si qua kuok doi Nathan. Tren bon la dong ji to yte, and hung don thuok vao chin jua. Emoti la Thursday duok gap kan than de ten ko. Te Emma run re kaya moare. Emma. On de luan hai vong min ko the juem tren exe oi dao nai. And hung on beat minich ky. On muon them chut thoi john. On muon theem koi them vi lan nua. Muon cam nen em trong vong teon. muon ghi no hung tam tu tok em trong tung hoi tho kan lai. Bacchus I in oi on kong kan yu thoi john. Ben tim bam sin, Thursday ma tuong den gu yen sit bao nam qua, koi kung de chien tang. On kong muon em no din on nu mot nuoi ben. On muon em no din on trong en hung bui chu ruk nong ben ho. Trong tien koi vang vong jua rung fong. Va trong moi du no bi de lam nin chung ta. Hey song teep Emma. Hey you them lon nua, mim koi them lon nua. Va tim they han fuck mon kong the treo em tron ven. On my. Nathan. Buck Thursday roy koi te Emma. Kong goi fich suang san lung tua veo tuong. Nuok mat ti now treo are kan fong toi sam lai quan ko. Valandao tien trong doi. Emma hu the now la cam jiak mat nice kai nuoi min yu van con tho. Tien qua mo ki. Nathan dung du on mat on bat gap buck Thursday dui chan ko. On kong en oigi. On chi byuk den kui suang va kio ko veo vong te. Kong ko loi bao chua. Kong ko loi xian loi. Chi ko hai tom han tan vio dang ko gang gep lai chut gi con sat lai jua mua dong lam but. Emma vui mat veon guk Nathan, ne nip tim on. Nip dap u ot en hung van ko gang vi ko. Va trong koan kakai ko the rang du ko ra sa ko se kong buong te. Kong bao gio. Winter no longer held the promise of renewal. It arrived like a cold storm, filled with sorrow, bringing with it winds that carelessly swept through memories that hadn't yet faded. In the days after Nathan left Emma a letter, everything changed. She no longer saw Nathan going outside as he used to. He spent more time in his room, sometimes without speaking a word. Emma still visited him every day, still stayed by his side like they used to. But in Nathan's eyes, something had disappeared. She could feel it even though he never said a word. Day after day, Emma dared not ask about his health anymore. She feared that just bringing it up would make everything too real, and she wouldn't be able to face that truth. One morning when Emma arrived, she found Nathan sitting by the window, gazing outside. His eyes clouded as though he could no longer focus on anything. The strands of hair on his forehead, his tired gaze, and the weak smile he still tried to keep had lost the vitality they once had. "You're here," Nathan whispered softly, his voice as light as the breeze. "Yes," Emma smiled, trying to keep her composure, but the worry in her heart was impossible to hide. She walked over, sat down beside him, and took his hand in hers. "How are you feeling?" Nathan looked at her for a long moment, as though he wanted to say something but held back. "I'm fine. It's just, everything is starting to blur, Emma." Emma's heart twisted. These words, the ones she had always feared hearing, had finally come. She tightened her grip on his hand, unwilling to let him go. "Nathan, don't say that. I don't want you to give up." Nathan looked into her eyes, his deep brown eyes no longer holding the familiar light. "I'm not giving up, Emma. I just can't keep going like this anymore." He took a deep breath as though trying to summon some strength. "You deserve a different life, a life without me. You deserve love and happiness, Emma. Forget about me." His words were like a knife cutting deep into Emma's heart. She couldn't move, couldn't react. All the emotions inside her suddenly became a tangled mess, unsure of what was real and what was a lie. You can't say that," Emma choked, tears falling. "I can't forget you. No matter what happens, I'll be here, Nathan. I won't go anywhere." Nathan gently stroked her hair, his cold hand still full of love. "Emma, you've done so much for me already. It's time for you to live for yourself." She lowered her head, unable to look him in the eye anymore. Every time she looked at him, she saw the pain, the distance that could never be bridged. The days that followed seemed like time itself had stopped. Emma spent every moment with Nathan, trying to do the simple things she knew he loved. They walked together under the sunset, sat by the fire, listened to music and shared old stories. Each moment was a silent farewell. And then on a night when the snow fell heavily, Nathan didn't wake up. The whole town seemed to sink into silence, as if it too knew that everything had come to an end. Emma sat beside him, her hand still tightly holding his, not wanting to let go. But in the end she had to let him go. Nathan was no longer here, but the memories of him, his love for her, would never fade. The town was still the same. The streets were covered with snow, the houses stood tall under the gray sky, and cold winds blew through every corner. But Emma felt like she was no longer the same person. Everything around her remained unchanged, but she had. Nathan had gone, leaving a large emptiness in her heart that no one could fill. She still thought of him every day, the images, the memories. She still dreamed of those afternoons by Mirror Lake, where they had promised to be together forever. But now all of that was just shattered dreams. Every morning, she woke up in the quiet house. At every meal, she would suddenly realize that there was an empty chair where Nathan used to sit, and his shadow always followed her wherever she went. But time doesn't wait for anyone. The town kept turning, the neighbors continued with their lives, and Emma knew she couldn't remain lost in sorrow forever. She started working again, teaching the children in the town, though the pain in her heart never quite faded. One day, as she was teaching, a student named Oliver approached her, holding an old book in his hands. "Miss Emma, you like reading these kinds of books, don't you? You used to tell us stories about them, always laughing and talking about those tales." Emma looked up and met Oliver's gaze. Part of her wanted to pull away to avoid the stories, but another part realized that it was those very memories of Nathan, of the times they read together, laughed together, that had helped her get through the hardest days. "Yes, I do like reading it," Emma replied softly, taking the book from his hands. "Thank you." From that day on, Emma started to spend more time on herself. She no longer drowned in sorrow but began to find small joys, things she had once loved. She returned to her habit of reading, and even began writing down the stories she and Nathan had shared. Every word written was a way to keep Nathan close, even though he was no longer there. She began walking under the red maple trees, recalling the times they sat together, sharing dreams of the future. But this time Emma no longer cried. She looked up at the sky, feeling the breath of the wind, and gradually understood that, though Nathan was no longer physically present, the love he had for her would always remain in her heart. One afternoon, as Emma stood by Mirror Lake, she saw Nathan's figure in the sunset. The feeling was so gentle, as if he were standing beside her, whispering words of love. But she no longer felt pain. She smiled, looking out at the lake, and in her heart, she knew that though Nathan was no longer alive, his love would always be a part of her. And then Emma returned to her life. She knew that, though the sadness remained, she had learned how to move forward, how to love herself. And no matter how much time passed, Emma knew that in her heart, Nathan would always be an irreplaceable part of her. When spring arrived, the small town came to life once more. Warm breezes blew through the streets, making the air pleasant, and the first buds began to sprout from the cold ground. Everything was changing, and Emma was no longer the girl of the cold winter. Time couldn't wait for anyone, but for Emma, it taught her that no matter how harsh life was, there were always new opportunities ahead. She no longer hid her pain too long in her heart. Spring arrived like a new promise, and she decided to step outside and face the future without being held back by the past. One afternoon, as Emma was walking along the riverbank, she ran into Alex, an old acquaintance. Alex had been a familiar face at the town's parties, but she had never really spent much time talking to him. He was cheerful, easygoing, and had a strangely positive energy that Emma noticed now. "Emma, do you remember me?" Alex smiled when he saw her, waving his hand as if to grab her attention. Emma was surprised but then smiled back. "Oh, I remember. It's been a while. I just got back to town after a work trip, and if you don't mind, I'd love to invite you for coffee. I heard you really like that new cafe by the lake." Emma looked into Alex's bright, sparkling eyes. She could feel the sincerity in them, and a part of her started to feel warm. Though part of her still carried memories of Nathan, she knew that she needed to open her heart to embrace new things. "Sure, we can grab a coffee," Emma said, her eyes no longer uncertain. Their conversation flowed smoothly, not awkwardly like times before when she had interacted with strangers. Alex had a way of making her feel at ease. They shared stories about what they had gone through over the years, from small-town tales to future plans. Every time Alex laughed, Emma felt like a part of her was being healed. He wasn't trying to replace Nathan, but Alex's presence brought a sense of peace to her that she had been missing for a long time. A week after that encounter, Alex took the initiative to invite her to explore new places in the town. They walked together through the small streets, visited familiar shops, and even went to a field of wildflowers in full bloom. These simple trips gradually opened Emma's heart, much like the buds beginning to sprout from the ground after winter. Day by day, Emma realized that some emotions were unpredictable. She had never thought she could open her heart to anyone other than Nathan, but now she felt a sense of relief knowing there was someone willing to listen, care, and share the everyday moments with her. One spring evening as the sun was setting, Alex held Emma's hand, looking at her with gentle eyes. "Emma, I know you might not be ready for this, but I want you to know that I'm here, always ready for you, even if it's just as a friend." His words didn't surprise her, but they made Emma's heart race. She looked up at Alex, and though there was a slight hesitation, she couldn't hide her true feelings anymore. "I know," Emma whispered. "I don't know what will happen in the future, but I really appreciate everything you've brought into my life these past days." Alex smiled, squeezing her hand tightly. "No need to know what comes next. Let everything unfold naturally." Spring, the season of rebirth, brought Emma not only warm breezes but also an opportunity to love again, even if it would never be the same as before. She knew Nathan would always have a place in her heart, but she also deserved to be happy and loved, even if it was in a different way. And when the spring flowers bloomed, Emma felt a new sense of hope in her heart. Though it might be small, it was enough to bring light to the days ahead. Spring had arrived, but Emma still couldn't fully escape the dark clouds of the past. Although she had begun to open up to Alex, a part of her still couldn't let go of the memories of Nathan. It felt as though she was living between two worlds, one filled with sorrow and old memories, and another filled with hope and new opportunities that Alex brought. The days with Alex passed gently, but at times, Emma still felt a void within herself. His tender gestures, warm conversations, everything she had longed for after losing Nathan, were present, but the truth was, she wasn't ready to step into a new love. She still loved Nathan, still remembered him every moment. One evening as they sat together in a quiet cafe, the atmosphere settled, with only soft music playing from the speakers. Alex looked at Emma, his expression serious. "Emma, I know you're not ready yet, and I don't want to pressure you, but I also don't want to lie to myself anymore. I like you, I truly like you, and I think you deserve real love." Emma felt her heart tighten. She knew Alex was speaking his truth, but she couldn't answer him right away. "Alex, I thank you for always being there for me, but there's something I need to make clear. I still can't forget Nathan. He's still a part of my heart, whether I want it or not." Alex fell silent, his eyes betraying his disappointment. "I understand. I don't want you to change yourself to love me, but I also can't keep waiting for someone you no longer love." Emma lowered her head, her heart heavy. She didn't want to lose Alex, but she also didn't want to deceive herself. Her feelings for Nathan ran too deep, and though she knew he was gone forever, she couldn't fully step out of his shadow. The next day, Emma decided to go alone. She needed time to think, to find herself again, and to decide whether she could continue with Alex, or if she still needed to be alone to heal the wounds within her. She drove out of town and stopped at a hill where she and Nathan used to visit when they were together. This was the place where they watched sunsets, where they whispered promises of the future. The scenery hadn't changed, but she felt as though a part of her had shattered. Emma sat down on the grass, gazing at the horizon. A sense of emptiness enveloped her. Memories of Nathan surged like waves crashing on the shore, relentless and unstoppable. But in that moment, she realized something. Nathan would always be a part of her, but she couldn't live forever in the past. She deserved a future, whether it was with Alex or on her own. But no matter what, she needed to allow herself to move forward. When Emma returned to town, she decided to meet Alex. He was sitting in a small bar, the warm light shining on his face. Emma walked up, and when he saw her, his expression tightened slightly. "I've thought about what you said," Emma began, her voice firm, "and I want you to know that I don't want to hurt you. I can't promise to love you right away, but I want to try. I want to give us a chance." Alex stood up, his eyes lighting up, and he took her hand. "I don't need a promise right now. Just give me a chance. You know, that's already the most wonderful thing." The feeling inside Emma lifted more than ever. She no longer feared being pulled back into the past. She knew that loving again wouldn't be easy, but she also understood that love wasn't a competition, nor was it a comparison between old memories and new hopes. It was about acceptance, understanding, and moving forward together. And though Nathan was no longer here, his love had taught Emma the most important lesson. True love never completely disappears, it just changes form. And maybe, just maybe, one day she would love again fully with a healed heart. Summer had arrived, bringing with it long days of warm golden sunlight and a clear open sky. The small town was now full of life, and Emma felt something changing inside her. Though she had once faced dark days and the pain of loss, now she could feel the gentleness of a new life. With Alex by her side, Emma felt like she was learning to love again, slowly and cautiously. She couldn't forget Nathan, but she had come to understand that the past wasn't a place she could live in forever. She couldn't stand still, clinging to old memories. She had to move forward, to embrace the new opportunities life was offering. One afternoon, as they were walking by Mirror Lake, a place where Emma and Nathan had once promised to be together forever, Emma suddenly stopped and turned to look at Alex. "You know, this is the place where I used to sit with Nathan, the place where we shared so many dreams. Back then I thought our love would never change, that we would always be together forever." Alex looked at her with a gentle gaze. "That love will never go away. It made you who you are today. But you also deserve a new love, a love that feels complete and peaceful." Emma remained silent, gazing out at the lake. The water reflected the deep blue sky, and in that reflection, she saw the change within herself. The ripples on the surface of the lake seemed to symbolize the constant change in life. She couldn't change the past, but she could change the way she faced it. "I've lived in pain for so long," Emma whispered. "And now I want to live for myself. I don't want to keep looking back at the past and miss out on the beautiful things right in front of me." Alex took her hand, holding it tightly. "I'm always here beside you, and I want you to know there's no rush. We'll walk together one step at a time." The warmth of his hand spread throughout Emma's body. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't be walking alone. She had Alex, and with him she would learn to love again from the beginning, gently and naturally. When they got home, Emma sat down at her desk, the same desk where she had once written letters to Nathan, letters she never sent. She picked up the pen, but this time she wasn't writing about sorrow. She was writing about what she had learned. She wrote down her thoughts, no longer weighed down by old memories, but filled with hope for a new future. When she finished, Emma smiled and set the pen down. Her past love would always be a part of her, but she was ready to embrace a new love. She knew that Nathan would always be in her heart, but she also deserved to live fully with what the future had to offer. This summer would be a season full of hope. Emma would no longer live in the past. She would live for the present and the future. And maybe, just maybe, one day, she would look back and realize that love wasn't about holding on to what was lost, but about opening her heart to embrace the new. The end. When Autumn Fades is not just a story about lost love, but also a journey of healing and finding oneself. Emma's spring is not just the end of a cycle, but the beginning of a new season. A season of hope, love, and rebirth.